There are moments in life that split everything into two versions. The life before and the life after. For me, that moment happened on my 18th birthday. But to understand why that night destroyed everything, you need to understand my family first. From the outside, we looked normal. A nice family in Boston. Dad worked in finance. Mom owned a boutique. We had a golden retriever named Rusty and one of those houses that looked perfect in holiday photos. But inside that house, nothing was equal, especially when it came to my older sister, Veronica. She was the golden child. Beautiful, confident, popular, the kind of person everyone naturally paid attention to, and my mother adored her. Everything revolved around Veronica. Her feelings, her problems, her dreams. I was just there, the responsible one, the quiet one, the one expected to sacrifice. When I was 12, my parents divorced. Dad moved to Chicago and slowly disappeared from my life. At the time, I blamed him completely. I didn't know yet how much my mother manipulated the situation. After the divorce, things got worse. Veronica married Daniel, an investment banker from a wealthy family, and my mother acted like the wedding was a royal event. She spent over $50,000 she didn't even have. Meanwhile, I was working part-time jobs just to afford my bridesmaid dress. Then Veronica started having children. James first, then Freya, then Caleb. And every single time she needed something, my mother rushed to save her. More money, more support, more sacrifice, usually from me. If I needed books for school, use the library. If I needed help with tuition, your sister has children to feed. That sentence became the soundtrack of my teenage years. Your sister needs more. So I worked, constantly. Morning coffee shop shifts, tutoring after school, weekend office jobs. I barely slept, but I still graduated top of my class. Perfect GPA, scholarships to multiple universities. I thought maybe, finally, things would change. I thought maybe my hard work would matter. I was wrong. My 18th birthday fell on a Tuesday. I remember because I actually managed to get the evening off work, which almost never happened. I came home tired but excited. Not because I expected a party. I knew better than that. But because turning 18 felt important. I had plans, a future, possibilities. When I walked into the kitchen, my mother and Veronica were sitting at the table covered in papers and spreadsheets. They barely looked at me. "There's leftover lasagna if you're hungry," Mom said without lifting her eyes. I heated up a plate and sat down. That's when I noticed something strange. My college documents were spread across the table. A cold feeling moved through my stomach. "Why do you have my college paperwork?" Veronica sighed dramatically. "We should probably just tell her." Mom folded her hands together and gave me that look. The look that always came right before she asked me to sacrifice something for Veronica. "Lena, we need to talk about your college plans." The moment she said it, I knew. I just didn't know how bad it was going to be. Mom explained everything so casually, like what she was about to say was completely normal. Like we were discussing groceries, or the weather, or anything other than my future. "Veronica and Daniel need a bigger house," she said while organizing the papers in front of her. "With another baby coming, they need more space." I stayed quiet, not because I agreed, because deep down, I already knew where this conversation was heading. I just didn't want to hear it out loud. Veronica leaned back in her chair dramatically, rubbing her stomach like she was carrying the weight of the world instead of her third child. "Daniel's bonus wasn't what we expected this year," she sighed. "And housing prices are insane right now." Mom nodded immediately, like every word Veronica said was wisdom from heaven itself. "We've been trying to figure out the finances," Mom added. That's when my eyes landed on the folder, sitting near her elbow. My folder, my college documents, scholarship letters, financial aid forms. And suddenly, my stomach dropped. "Why do you have my college paperwork?" The room changed instantly. Veronica exchanged a glance with Mom. Not nervous, prepared, like they had already rehearsed this conversation before I walked through the door. "We might as well tell her," Veronica muttered. Mom folded her hands slowly and looked directly at me. "Lena, we need to discuss your college plans." The way she said it made my skin crawl. Not because she sounded emotional, because she sounded completely certain, like the decision had already been made. The thing is, she continued carefully, Veronica and Daniel found a beautiful 4-bedroom home in Brookline. I blinked. Okay. And with Caleb coming soon, they really need more space. Still not understanding where this was going, I nodded slowly. That's nice. Mom inhaled deeply. But they're short on the down payment. There it was. The setup. I could feel it before the words even came out. We need to use your college fund. Silence. Complete silence. For a second, I genuinely thought I misheard her. My what? Your college fund, Mom repeated calmly, almost annoyed that I wasn't understanding fast enough. You already got scholarships. Community college is perfectly fine for your first 2 years. I stared at her, then at Veronica. Neither of them looked guilty. Not even slightly. Like this was obvious. Like I was selfish for even questioning it. That money is for my education, I said quietly. Veronica rolled her eyes immediately. Oh my God, Lena, don't start. Don't start. As if I was the problem. That fund was created for me. I continued, trying to stay calm. Dad set it aside for college. And family needs change, Mom snapped. The sharpness in her voice caught me off guard. We're talking about children here. So am I replied. Your child. That made Veronica laugh. Actually laugh. Please, she scoffed. You have no idea what real responsibility looks like. Try having 3 kids before acting like your life is so difficult. I felt heat rising in my chest. Not sadness. Not embarrassment. Anger. Years of swallowed frustration suddenly pushing upward all at once. I worked for those scholarships, I said. I worked every single day while keeping my grades perfect. And Veronica snapped. Daniel works too. We all sacrifice things. No, I replied before I could stop myself. I sacrifice things. Constantly. The room went still. Mom narrowed her eyes instantly. What's that supposed to mean? And suddenly, everything I had buried for years came pouring out. It means every single time Veronica wants something, everyone expects me to give things up for her. Mom crossed her arms immediately. That's ridiculous. Is it? I asked. I could hear my voice shaking now. Not from fear anymore. From rage. I work multiple jobs while she gets everything handed to her. She has children. And I have a future. The words exploded out of me before I could stop them. Even Veronica looked shocked. Probably because I had never spoken to them like that before. Ever. Mom's face hardened instantly. That attitude right there is exactly the problem. What problem? You're selfish. That word again. Selfish. I almost laughed. Because nothing in my life had ever belonged to me long enough for me to be selfish about it. Not my time. Not my money. Not even my future. You know what? Veronica interrupted dramatically. Forget the fancy university. Stay here. Go to community college. Save money like normal people. Normal people. I stared at her in disbelief. This woman had a husband making 6 figures. A mother constantly bailing her out. And she was lecturing me about struggle. You already decided all this without asking me? I whispered. Mom didn't even hesitate. This isn't a negotiation. That sentence changed something inside me forever. Because suddenly I understood. This was never a discussion. My feelings were never part of the equation. To them, my future was just another resource Veronica could use. And the terrifying part? They genuinely believed they were right. I looked around the kitchen slowly. The same kitchen where I studied late at night. The same kitchen where I drank coffee before early shifts. The same kitchen where I spent years trying to become someone successful enough to finally matter. And none of it mattered to them at all. Mom sighed dramatically like I was exhausting her. You're 18 now, Lena. Her tone became colder. Which means you have a choice. I already knew what was coming. You either accept that the money is going toward your sister's family. She paused. Or you can pack your bags and figure life out yourself. The room went completely silent. Even Veronica looked slightly surprised by how far Mom went. But only for a second. Then she smirked. Because she expected me to fold. Like always. That's what everyone expected from me. To sacrifice quietly. To cry privately. To eventually give in. I looked at my mother. Really looked at her. And suddenly I realized something devastating. She fully expected me to choose Veronica over myself. Again. And in that exact moment, something inside me finally snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, like a rope stretched too tight for too many years, finally breaking. I stood up slowly and said 4 words that changed my life forever. I'll pack my bags. The silence afterward felt unreal. Mom blinked, actually blinked, like she couldn't process what she just heard. Veronica laughed nervously. Oh my God, stop being dramatic. But I wasn't dramatic anymore. I was done, completely done. I walked toward my room. I don't remember much about packing that night. Not because it happened too fast, but because my brain almost shut down emotionally. Everything felt numb, like my body was moving on instinct while my mind struggled to understand what had just happened. I pulled my biggest suitcase out from under the bed and started throwing things inside without even thinking. Jeans, sweaters, work uniforms, toothbrush, laptop, phone charger, the essentials. Every few seconds I would stop and stare at my room. The walls, the desk where I studied every night, the old family photos sitting on a shelf. And suddenly, none of it felt real anymore. It didn't feel like home, not after what they had just done, not after realizing that my own mother looked at my future like it was a backup savings account for Veronica. Mom stood in the doorway watching me, not helping, not apologizing, just watching. You're seriously leaving over this? Her voice sounded irritated more than concerned. That hurt more than yelling would have, because it proved this entire thing didn't feel cruel to her. It felt reasonable. I zipped my suitcase shut slowly. I'm not leaving over money, I said quietly. She crossed her arms. Then what are you leaving over? I looked directly at her. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing myself. Something flickered across her face. Confusion maybe, or annoyance, but definitely not guilt. You're acting like a victim, she snapped. Families help each other. I almost laughed, because somehow, family helping each other only ever seemed to go one direction. Toward Veronica. Always toward Veronica. I have helped this family my entire life, I replied. And it was true. I gave up opportunities, time, money, peace, over and over again. And every sacrifice became expected instead of appreciated. Veronica appeared behind Mom with that same superior expression she always had whenever things went her way. Where exactly are you going to go? She asked smugly. That question hit hard, because the truth was, I had no idea. I didn't have an apartment. I didn't have savings big enough for rent deposits. I barely had enough money to survive week to week between jobs and school applications. But somehow, staying there felt worse than uncertainty. Way worse. So I grabbed my suitcase, put my backpack over my shoulder, and walked toward the front door. Nobody stopped me. Nobody chased after me. Nobody said, wait. Not my mother. Not my sister. Nothing. That silence followed me all the way to my car. I remember sitting behind the wheel for almost 10 minutes without driving, just staring forward, hands shaking, trying not to cry, because once I cried, it would become real. Eventually, I started the engine and drove aimlessly through the city. Boston at night felt colder than usual. The streets looked different when you realized you didn't actually have anywhere to go. That's the thing nobody talks about with homelessness. It's not just fear. It's humiliation. The overwhelming realization that everyone around you has somewhere they belong, and suddenly you don't. Around midnight, I pulled into a Walmart parking lot. I had seen online that people sometimes slept there temporarily. At the time, it felt unreal, like something that happened to other people. Not me, not the girl with perfect grades, not the girl accepted into multiple universities, not the girl who did everything right. And yet, there I was. I reclined the driver's seat as far back as it would go and used my folded work hoodie as a pillow. The cold was unbearable. Even with blankets from my trunk, I could still feel February air creeping through the windows. I barely slept. Every sound startled me. Car doors slamming, shopping carts moving, random voices outside. I spent most of the night staring at the ceiling of my car, asking myself the same question over and over again. How did my life become this? At around 5 in the morning, I drove to the cheap gym where I had a basic membership. I showered quickly before work, brushed my teeth in the sink, changed into my coffee shop uniform, and pretended everything was normal. That became my routine. Wake up freezing, shower at the gym, work, Study. Sleep in my car. Repeat. For 2 weeks. 2 weeks that felt like 2 years. I worked every shift I could get. Morning coffee shop. Afternoon tutoring. Weekend office work. I was exhausted constantly. There were moments I almost broke down completely. Like the night temperatures dropped below freezing and I had to sleep wearing gloves because my fingers hurt from the cold. Or when I saw college acceptance letters sitting unopened in my back seat because I was too overwhelmed to even think about the future anymore. But the worst part wasn't physical exhaustion. It was emotional. Knowing my own family knew exactly what was happening and didn't care enough to stop it. Not one phone call, not one apology, nothing. At first, I kept checking my phone constantly, waiting for mom to call, waiting for her to say, "Come home," but the call never came. Eventually, I stopped checking, and somehow that hurt even more. During those weeks, shame became part of me. I avoided friends, avoided conversations, lied constantly. Yeah, everything's fine, just busy, lots of work lately, because admitting the truth felt impossible. How do you tell people your own mother chose your sister's house over your education? How do you explain that your family threw you away like an inconvenience? You don't. You survive quietly. That's what I did. Until the day Professor Clara Hughes found me asleep in the library. I had stayed on campus after classes because it was warmer than my car. At some point while studying, I passed out at the table. The next thing I remember was hearing a soft voice. "Lena." I opened my eyes suddenly. Professor Hughes stood there looking worried. "You okay?" I immediately sat up straight, embarrassed. "Yeah, sorry, just tired." But she didn't move, didn't leave. She just kept looking at me carefully. And then she asked the question that changed my life. "Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight?" That question destroyed me. Completely. Because for 2 weeks, I had been holding everything together with pure stubbornness. Pretending I was okay. Pretending I could handle it. Pretending I wasn't terrified every single night. And the second someone showed genuine concern, I broke. I started crying right there in the library. Not pretty crying either. Full shaking, can't breathe, completely exhausted crying. Professor Hughes didn't interrupt me, didn't judge me. She just sat down quietly and waited. I expected judgment after telling Professor Hughes everything. I expected pity, maybe disappointment. At the very least, awkward silence. Instead, she listened calmly while I sat there crying in the middle of the library, trying to explain how my entire life had collapsed in less than 1 hour. I told her everything. The college fund, the ultimatum, sleeping in my car, working nonstop just to survive. And the entire time, she never interrupted me, never questioned me, never gave me that look people sometimes give when they secretly think you're exaggerating. When I finally stopped talking, she sat quietly for a moment. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You should never have had to survive this alone." That sentence broke something open inside me. Because until then, I honestly believed being abandoned was somehow my fault. Like maybe if I had been less difficult, less emotional, less selfish, things would have been different. But hearing someone say out loud that what happened to me was wrong, it changed everything. Professor Hughes closed her laptop slowly and stood up. "Come on," she said gently. I blinked at her. "What?" "You're coming with me." I stared at her in confusion. "You're not sleeping in your car tonight." I tried protesting immediately. "No, it's okay. I'll figure something out." "No," she interrupted firmly. "You'll stay in my guest room until we make an actual plan." Actual plan? Nobody had said words like that to me in a long time. Not panic, not survival. A plan. I remember sitting silently in her car while she drove through the city. I kept expecting her to change her mind halfway there, because kindness that unconditional felt unreal to me. When we arrived at her house, she showed me a small but cozy guest room with floral curtains and stacks of books on the nightstand. "It's not fancy," she said. I nearly laughed. To me, it looked like safety. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept in a real bed, and I cried again before falling asleep. Not from sadness this time. Relief. Pure relief. The next morning, Professor Hughes made coffee and sat with me at the kitchen table before work. Instead of treating me like a charity case, she treated me like someone capable. That mattered more than she probably realized. "We're going to figure this out step by step," she said while handing me a notebook. Then she started helping me organize my life. Financial aid applications, emergency student housing options, additional scholarship programs, internship opportunities, budgeting, planning. For the first time since leaving home, I felt like maybe my future wasn't over after all. But it still wasn't easy, not even close, because survival mode never really stopped. I enrolled at a local state university instead of my dream school because it was the only financially realistic option. That decision hurt more than I admitted to anyone. Every time I saw social media posts from former classmates moving into beautiful dorms at prestigious universities, I felt like I had failed somehow, even though logically I knew I hadn't. Still, it was hard not to compare. College became my entire life. Not the fun version people talk about. Not parties. Not football games. Not spring break trips. My version of college was exhaustion. Wake up early. Classes. Work. Study. Sleep for 4 hours. Repeat. Over and over again. I waitressed at night. Worked IT support during weekends. Tutored struggling students between classes. Took freelance coding projects whenever possible. Sometimes I worked so much that I forgot what day it was. There were nights I fell asleep sitting at my desk while coding. Mornings where I physically felt sick from stress. Weeks where my meals consisted almost entirely of instant noodles and coffee because that's all I could afford. But strangely, I also discovered something during those years. I was stronger than I thought. Every problem forced me to adapt. Every obstacle forced me to grow. And slowly, the terrified girl sleeping in her car started disappearing. Not completely, but piece by piece. That's also when coding stopped feeling like just schoolwork. It became an escape. The one area of my life where things actually made sense. Code had logic, structure, solutions. Unlike my family, unlike emotions, unlike betrayal. And eventually, that passion changed everything. During my second year, I met Isabella Tran in one of my programming classes. At first, I honestly thought she was intimidating. She was brilliant, fast-talking, confident, creative in ways I wasn't. Where I approached problems methodically, she attacked them with instinct. And somehow, we balanced each other perfectly. She became the first real friend I made in college. Not someone who knew the polished version of me. The real version. The exhausted version. The girl constantly terrified of losing stability again. One night after class, we sat outside a coffee shop talking about money stress. Student debt. Bills. Trying to survive adulthood without family support. And somewhere during that conversation, an idea was born. What if there was an app for people like us? Isabella asked. I looked at her. What do you mean? Not rich investors, she explained excitedly. Normal people. Students. Young adults. People trying to survive paycheck to paycheck. The idea stayed in my head for days afterward. Then weeks. Eventually, it became an obsession. We started sketching ideas during study sessions. Building prototypes between assignments. Testing features with classmates. And for the first time in years, I felt something dangerous again. Hope. Real hope. Not survival hope. Not make it through another week hope. Future hope. The kind that scares you because losing it would hurt too much. We call the app Sense. Simple. Clean. Focus on helping normal people understand money without feeling stupid or overwhelmed. Most financial apps back then were clearly designed for wealthy adults, not struggling students trying to avoid overdraft fees. We wanted something different, something honest. So we worked, constantly, coding until sunrise, fixing bugs between classes, living on caffeine and stubbornness. And despite how impossible everything still felt, for the first time since leaving home, I started believing my life might become something bigger than survival. At first, nobody believed in sins. Not investors, not business mentors, not even some of our professors. They all gave us the same look. Too young, too inexperienced, too ambitious. One investor actually laughed during a pitch meeting and told us, college students don't care about financial planning. I remember leaving that meeting furious because he didn't understand. People like us had to care about money. We didn't have parents paying rent. We didn't have trust funds waiting for us after graduation. One mistake could ruin us. That's what made sins different. It wasn't built by wealthy executives pretending to understand struggle. It was built by two exhausted girls living paycheck to paycheck. So we kept going, even when things looked impossible. After graduation, Isabella and I moved into the smallest apartment imaginable. Roaches, broken heating, thin walls. But it was cheap, and every dollar mattered. During the day, we worked freelance jobs to survive. At night, we built sins. I coded until my eyes burned. Isabella redesigned interfaces over and over until everything felt intuitive. There were weeks we barely slept, weeks where failure felt inevitable. But quitting? That wasn't an option, because I had already survived worse than failure. I had survived abandonment, homelessness, being treated like my future didn't matter. Compared to that, rejection emails were nothing. Then slowly, things started changing. A small tech blog featured us. Downloads increased. Then a financial influencer mentioned the app online. Suddenly, thousands of people were signing up. Then tens of thousands. Then hundreds of thousands. The growth became insane. Every morning, we woke up to bigger numbers. More users. More investors calling us back. More opportunities. And eventually, the same people who dismissed us started competing to invest in the company. The irony was almost funny. 5 years later, Sens became one of the fastest-growing financial apps in the country. That's when the acquisition offer arrived. I still remember sitting in the conference room, staring at the number on the screen. It didn't feel real, not even remotely. The amount was enough to change my life forever. Enough to change Isabella's life forever. Enough to guarantee we would never struggle financially again. After weeks of negotiations, we accepted. At 30 years old, I became a millionaire. And the strangest part? My first thought wasn't excitement. It was that freezing Walmart parking lot. That terrified 18-year-old girl sleeping in her car with nowhere to go. I kept thinking, you made it. Not because of my family. Not because someone rescued me financially. But because I refused to quit. Eventually, after months of searching, I bought my dream home. A beautiful craftsman-style house in one of the nicest neighborhoods near Boston. Huge windows, hardwood floors, wraparound porch, a backyard big enough for future family gatherings I once believed I'd never have. The house cost nearly $1 million, and every single inch of it felt earned. During renovations, my father contacted me unexpectedly. Apparently, he had seen news about Sens online. He wanted to congratulate me. At first, I almost ignored him. 14 years is a long time. Too long. But something told me to meet him. So we had coffee. And for the first time in my life, my father told me the truth. Mom had manipulated far more than I realized. She blocked communication, deleted messages, controlled information after the divorce. He admitted he knew about the college fund situation eventually. But by then he felt ashamed and didn't know how to fix things. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was honest. And honestly, that mattered. Then he told me something else. Veronica and Daniel were struggling financially again. Their house was gone. Daniel lost his high-paying job. Debt was piling up. And suddenly, everything felt weirdly familiar. Like history was repeating itself. That's when I made the decision that changed everything. I invited them to my housewarming party. Maybe I wanted closure. Maybe I wanted them to finally see what I became without them. Or maybe part of me still wanted validation from people who never truly valued me. Either way, I sent the invitations, and they accepted immediately. I had no idea that night would turn into the biggest confrontation of my life. The morning of the housewarming felt surreal. Sunlight filled every room of the house, while caterers prepared food downstairs and music played softly through the speakers. Everything looked perfect. Friends arrived first. Co-workers, neighbors, Professor Hughes and her husband. Even my father showed up early carrying a small gift bag and looking nervous. Then, at exactly 4:30 p.m., the doorbell rang again. And there they were. My mother, Veronica, Daniel, and the kids. The moment I saw them standing there, my stomach tightened instantly. Because despite everything, some part of me was still that scared 18-year-old girl. But this time was different. This time, I wasn't powerless. I welcomed them inside politely and gave them a tour of the house. And almost immediately, I noticed it. The look, that calculating expression in Veronica's eyes while she walked through each room. The same expression she had the night they stole my future. She kept commenting on everything. The schools around here are amazing. The kids would love this backyard. So much space. At first, I tried ignoring it, until she stood up during my speech and said something that made the entire room go silent. This house would actually be perfect for our family. I froze. Every guest froze. Then she smiled and continued like this was completely normal. You're single. No kids. Honestly, a house this big is wasted on one person. My mother nodded immediately beside her. Your sister's children need stability. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything they had already taken from me, they came here expecting my house too. And suddenly, something inside me became unbelievably calm. Not emotional. Not angry. Done. Completely done. I walked over to the TV and connected my phone. Then I opened the documents. The police reports. The fraudulent loans. The stolen college fund records. Everything. Projected across a giant screen for the entire room to see. The silence became unbearable. Daniel stared at the documents in horror. My father looked physically sick. And Veronica? For the first time in her life, she looked scared. Real fear. Because suddenly she couldn't manipulate the story anymore. Facts don't care about manipulation. I explained everything calmly. Sleeping in my car. The identity theft. The debt they left me with at 18. And then I showed proof that I paid every dollar back myself while putting myself through college. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Even the caterers stopped what they were doing. Then came the final blow. I revealed the hidden financial records, proving Veronica secretly lost hundreds of thousands of dollars from Daniel's accounts over the years. Daniel looked devastated, like his entire marriage collapsed in real time. And honestly, part of me felt sad for him, because for the first time, I realized Veronica wasn't just selfish. She was broken, completely dependent on taking from other people because she never learned how to build anything herself. Eventually, Mom started yelling, accusing me of embarrassing the family, claiming they only wanted what was best. But this time, nobody believed her, not even herself. And for the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel small anymore. I felt free, because that night wasn't really about revenge. It was about truth, about finally refusing to protect people who destroyed me. The terrified girl sleeping in her car at 18 thought she lost everything. But she was wrong. That night, she actually found herself.